if your limiter to your pull-ups improving is your strength, so your strength is what holds you back from doing pull-ups, then choosing to do them strict might give you a great training effect. Or say you want, if you've got an aesthetic goal and you want to build your back and biceps, doing the strict pull-ups will help with that from a training effect and stimulus point of view, but it's definitely going to be slower than doing kipping pull-ups. So you're completely sacrificing your competitive score, but it's making a step towards your actual long-term goals. And if you go into a class without the awareness of what your goal is, you'll just do what everyone else is doing or what you feel like you should be doing, potentially missing an opportunity to make progress towards your goal. And don't get me wrong, like your goal might just be have fun, compete, have a laugh in the session, in which case just go with the flow, do what your mate's doing and have a laugh. But if you are more serious about making tangible steps forwards towards specific training goals, then yeah, always considering why you're doing the exercise in the first place might affect.
Exactly, because I guess it's when we need to think about the thing of when it comes to those type of workouts, even if you're say doing it to compete against a friend, it's you still want to be pushing yourself just outside of your comfort zone to make sure you're progressing, because you can still progress when you're competing against your friend. If you have an idea of what, say, where we talk about the threshold stuff like that, if you understand where you are and you're not just ending yourself, and you're so you can this is where I discussed at the start how it's like there's the gray area here, because it all kind of blends in quite in a way where it's quite hard to sometimes differentiate, which is why it's so important to as you just said there, understand what you're going into the session to do, because it then gives you a clearer picture of how to attack a workout. And even if you, and as I said there, even if you decide to compete against your friend, you can still say, I'm still going to try and work my progression, because I'm going to stay just in my threshold rather than ending myself on those 20 pull-ups as the example. I'm going to do my 12 and 8 and still try and move faster. So it's understanding that sweet spot. And I think make sure when it comes to training, you should be competing against yourself. And I mentioned this to you earlier, and there's a really good quote that I saw from Jordan Peterson, which was compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. And for me, I think that's such a strong, powerful quote, because it's like we get so easily swept up in our friends and competing against them, but they're in they might have slept better. They might have they're stronger. So you're competing against someone that's just not you. And it's, and Instagram, it does it, everyone sees these other people's lives and stuff like that, and always the comparison is a thief of joy, right? So everyone always looking for those things, and you sometimes forget and get swept up in your own world and then taken it to someone else's, but you shouldn't be there. You should be in your own side of things. And when it comes to training, it's so important to have your goal of understanding your direction, and which was episode 6 for me. Is like it's crazy that even though it was our podcast and we filmed it, it really realigned a lot of my own personal goals, because it made me realize I was getting swept up in so many other people's say training methodologies and stuff like that. And it's like, I have a set way of training in which I enjoy. I like to experience other things, but it's so important to still remember what you're training towards, so you're still going in the right direction. And it's nice to say veer off every so often into different areas, because it gives you, broadens your training training experience, I'd say. So it's really good. But I think just to put it back into this part, which was, I think when it comes to the training, competing and testing, you're never wrong, whichever one you're doing. Just make sure you always understand what you're doing and what the intent is, because purpose and intent is so important.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing you just reminded me of before we move on, when you're competing against your mate, the two ways it can go are basically they're fitter than you and you push too hard too soon and you ruin your workout because you've just redlined and then you're just hanging on and you're not getting any useful training out of it. Or they're less fit than you and you coast it because you're going to beat them without actually challenging yourself. So because you're comparing to somebody else, you're not focused on the stimulus that's good for you.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're doing the workout and actually listening to your body a little bit more and thinking, right, where is my fitness and how do I just edge out of that comfort zone, which is the optimal way for me to get fitter and probably get the best score as well. But because you're focused on somebody else and the external result, you end up doing yourself a disservice. And I think it's hard to do, but having a bit of awareness around that will ultimately mean you get better results and you beat your mate more often, funnily enough.
Yeah, it's funny because I instantly get a picture of, like I say, about a year or so ago, with my own personal training, and when I was training alongside Gus, the head coach at Whip. And now Gus is a very proficient CrossFitter. He knows his body extremely well. And this is about 2 years ago. Now, I wasn't as proficient, not that I'm great now, but I wasn't as good. And I got the nickname of Redline Rob because it was, I'd be competing. I'd go in and I'd compete against everyone around me, trying to beat them, not kind of necessarily taking into account my own thresholds. So using Gus as the example, when I used to train against him, I'd say if we had a workout where it was, say, assault bike and pull-ups, I know that I could beat him on the assault bike because, one, I'm bigger and heavier and I'm just better at the assault bike. However, I know his pull-ups are better, but I'd still have the mentality of, right, I'm going to get off the assault bike faster, get to the pull-ups, move as far, and try and wait for him to catch up, get back, say if it was a 3 rounds, right? And then by the 3rd round, he'd then be getting off the assault bike at the same time as me and then finishing the pull-ups faster because I'm then gassed. So this is then where if all you're doing is competing, and if I never then change my focus, I'd always be losing to Gus.
Yeah.
Whereas if I then focus on, cool, okay, how can I get better at, say, pull-ups, since I know the assault bike is a strength of mine, I say, cool, I need to then get better at that. So I'd use the training stimulus at that. So when a workout comes back around, I can lose a couple of workouts, say, to Gus without realizing. But then when it comes to, say, that workout comes back around without him realizing, I might now suddenly be this don at pull-ups. And I can now do assault bike and pull-ups and be completely fine because I've trained the pull-ups.
Yeah.
So I think it can be so easy to get swept up in competing against your mate. And they say it's not wrong.
One thing you said there is perfect illustration, is you said, I was training against Gus, not training with Gus. And it just perfectly encapsulates that mindset, right? Like, I wasn't actually training with him. We were just training against each other, as if like the adversarial component is what it was all about versus the training component. And it's true.